I rewrote the chorus, making it really clear what it means. And it should be boys who like girls, who dig girls like they're girls, who do boys when they're drunk, who have bum sex with girls, always should be someone who you ghost the minute you get home.
Welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys who can love music with all their hearts but still find ways to bitch about it tell the backstory on the most influential albums of all time, as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, if you don't know today's album super well, or not at all, no worries. We're going to guide you through it. We're going to play song clips while we dive into the backstory of this artist and this album. And along the way, we're going to be breaking down these songs musically, culturally, sensationally, to offer you both our praise and our nitpicky complaints as musicians. And in the end of all that, we are going to vote on whether this album is really a must-listen before you die. Now, if you are a regular listener, part of our elite complainer core, thank you and welcome back. But if you happen to be new to this show, let me give you our standard disclaimer. You see, we're musicians ourselves. We do understand how difficult it is to make truly great art of any sort, and we approach this from a place of love and respect for the craft. However, we also enjoy nitpicking and complaining, as the title of our show suggests. It's just where our brains go and what makes us laugh, even for the stuff we really love. We're not super fans, but honestly, even if we were, we'd still enjoy laughing about the way our favorite music got made. So the bottom line here is there are no sacred cows. We will not be treating this artist or this album with any particular reverence. Instead, we'll be talking some loving smack the way all musicians do in the van ride to the next gig when the radio plays literally any song ever created. You have been warned. My name is Rob. I'm a guitar player with years of experience playing, writing, and recording music, and I'm here to lead us down a path of a band that means a heck of a lot to a lot of people from a certain island nation, but that barely ever cracked the surface of the cheeseburger-loving, Budweiser-chugging great United States of America. I'm talking, of course, about Blur and their 1994 album, Parklife. Let's kick things off right away with some music, a taste of the lead single, and also the opening track from this record. This one is called Girls. I'm listening to this week, we are going to, as is customary, introduce our panel of complainers for the evening with a particularly mean, particularly snarky tweet-length review. And to get into those, I'm going to throw it first to Tom.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure to be here. You know, all the way back in 1990, Blur frontman Damon Albarn said, "When our third album comes out, our place as the quintessential English band of the 90s will be assured. That is a simple statement of fact. I intend to write that album in 1994. I would have loved to listen to that album. Instead, I had to listen to Parklife."
Nice. And we're going to kick it next to Marty.
Hey, Rob. Thank you so much. I'm going to try not to sound like a complete idiot here, but here we go. The band Blur are a bunch of wankers, and the album Parklife, pure rubbish. It's really making me mental.
There we go.
Very nice. And we are going to throw it next to a very special guest who's going to get a proper introduction shortly. But first, I would love to hear a tweet-length review from Chris.
Okay, this is my tweet-length review, so help me God. Blur is what happens when you study at art school and half listen to the White Album before building an ivory tower from which you piss onto the ugly masses below whilst clicking your heels like Dick Van Dyke as you pop the cork on yet another bottle of champagne. What you fail to realise is that Oasis have actually captured all your piss that poured from your ivory tower, have bottled it and sold it to the same masses but as champagne. You then have the horrific dawning realization that the champagne you are drinking is actually Oasis's piss. Parklife More like Snot Life.
Nice. Nicely done.
Wow. Very excited to unpack that with you, Chris. But first up, this is Rob here and my tweet length review. Woohoo! That was me celebrating that I don't have to listen to this absolute shite anymore.
Oh, man.
Listen, before we go any farther into our general impressions of the album and start telling the backstory, I want to give a proper introduction to Chris, our very special guest. Now, before I let him speak for himself, I should say that his main qualification is that he's the first English person to ever appear on the show. Woohoo! Big expectations, buddy, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. But Chris, tell us a little about yourself, how you came to our show. You're excited to be here, of course, I hope, and maybe you can segue into talking about your relationship to Blur in this album.
I am a long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm going to, put some shit on you guys later, probably. But I've got this terrible weight on my shoulders of representing the UK. And I am not a cultural historian, nor am I a voice of the masses. These are my opinions, so don't come at me. I like Blur. I don't love them. I like Oasis. I don't love them either. This is a bit of a sacred cow, and I'm a bit nervous, to be completely honest, about laying into it. But I'm very happy to be here. And how it came about is I wrote a letter to you, Rob, about how Aphex Twin wasn't as much of a bellend as you thought you might have been. And you were kind enough to write back and offer the chance for me to come on and represent the entire British nation.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I'm sure there's eye rolling and sighs of like, who the fuck is this idiot? So you can continue to think that because I'm nobody famous.
Well, first off, let me just say, Chris, that your email perked my email reading eyes up because you were such a beautiful writer and you had a lot to say and you offered a lot of context. I believe you also told an anecdote about how much of a dick Jamiroquai was. And, Aphex Twin is a perfect example because we still get hate mail about our take on Aphex Twin to this day. It's still one of the most highly commented, negative commented episodes we have. So we love to be able to pair the material we're covering with someone who can bring a little added context. I'm not suggesting you're a Blur historian nor an English historian necessarily or cultural critic as per se, but I do believe you have a specific connection to this time and place, right? Maybe tell us a little more about that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a white guy in his 50s who grew up in London in the 90s, and it was an incredible place to be because there was this sense of sort of communal cultural worship that we don't really have anymore. We were riding this wave called Brit-Pop, which I don't even know if that made it to America, but it was Blur, Oasis, Pulp, Suede, the Stone Roses, and they're all on Robert Dimery's list. And you just like those bands because that was what was given to you. That was what you went to look for. And there was just this sort of collectiveness about it in the same way that everyone went to the cinema to watch Train Spotting. There was only one radio station. I'm making it sound like the 30s, but there was only one sort of predominant radio station that had John Peel on it. And John Peel was the absolute vanguard of new music. So it was a really interesting and exciting time to be in England. And especially for me to be in London, because Blur were basically the sort of southern band and Oasis were basically the northern band. This is where people are going to start to really shoot me. But it was a great place to be, and it was a great place to be in your late teens and early 20s, sort of dancing around and chanting, because they are kind of chanting songs, aren't they? A lot of these. Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Nice. I'm excited to hear more as we go through the episode. Chime in whenever you like with anything. But the fact that you lived through this time period, and yeah, I mean, we're going to see some of that in the story, some of the things you talked about. It was a much earlier time for the music industry. It was at the very early days of when so-called indie music started to become mainstream. And my impression is that movement you talked about was about reclaiming the identity of British music. So there is something bigger going on here that goes beyond just the band. But I would love to hear from the other guys. Let's start with you, Tom, on what your week was like.
I have listened to this album in the past, but it's been a while since I have put it on. It's has some songs that end up on playlists for me that I'll kind of experience it that way. So listening to it front to back this week, I was pretty pleased by the production touches. I actually thought that there was a lot more layering going on when I did the close headphone listen than I was experiencing listening to some of these singles in my car or something like that. So a lot of care. And I definitely think that this week, the line between Blur and Gorillaz became a lot more evident to me. I was like, oh, I can see where there's some of this non-acoustic instrumentation and flourishes that are coming into the production that would become a much greater hallmark of Gorillaz down the road. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a solid album, but if I have a complaint, and I assure you I do, is that it's a very varied album in terms of the sounds that the band is putting out. And I know it's the cheapest form of criticism, but it led me to then be like, oh, this sounds like a song from this band, or this sounds like a song from this band, because I don't necessarily think that they have defined their style on this album in a way that where you can listen to it and be like, oh, that's that Blur sound, you know?
I'll say one thing that I think stands out on this album, and it's a positive thing, is their use of vocal harmonies. And I'm not sure when along the line of British music there became all these bands that are such great harmonizers. I assumed it all started with the Beach Boys in the early 60s, but the Brits really took harmony and put it across their music spanning from the 60s up through today. And I just really admire their execution of their harmony on this album. That's the number one thing that stood out to me is something I liked.
Yeah, I assume you meant the Beatles, unless you were just rage baiting all our UK listeners just now.
Utterly embarrassed then, thinking, oh shit, the Beach Boys weren't from London, were they?
I just feel like the Beatles were influenced by the Beach Boys.
Yes, certainly.
In that regard. But certainly the Beatles have amazing harmonies. And you can hear, it's something that almost seems like you just know how to do if you're in like a British pop band.
Let me jump back in and play off a couple things you guys said. One, I agree generally that it is way more angular and weird and produced on a deep level than I was expecting. I had heard a lot of these singles, but I wasn't super familiar with any of the deep cut tracks, and I had never purposely put this album on from front to back. And I think I had thought that it was going to be more like Oasis, frankly, if you had polled me before I put it on. Pub rock, big choruses, stadium anthems. I'm pleasantly surprised that it's much more eclectic than that. But that said, I agree with you, Tom, that it is a real hodgepodge of stuff. That actually appeals to me. That makes me feel like it's less lazy and more creative, and there's more to bear repeat listenings. But it also made the week and the album a little bit challenging to penetrate because there's 16 tracks on this thing. They take a lot of twists and turns. It's not the easiest thing to play from front to back. That doesn't mean I don't like many aspects of it. I agree with Marty. The harmony is great. I kind of think their sound is defined by his voice and his vocal approach, which is, in my mind, the through line across everything.
I sort of think that's interesting because I took a different look at it because when I listened to it this week, I tried to separate myself from the cultural context of it because I know this album back to front, even though I don't really like it that much. And I did listen to it with slightly different ears. And it just made me realize how I thought the backline is so tight. Alex James and Dave Rowntree, I think his name is, just super tight. Really, I thought inventive bass lines. I love Graham Coxon. I love the fact that he chops into that guitar. It's like really angular, really atonal. And the thing that I started to actually dislike a bit more, I got a bit bored of Damon Albarn's, all right, hey, London, hey, and it never used to rub me up the wrong way because it was very much in the context of the time. But now I listen to it, I was like, oh, it's all this Billy lives down the street, he's a coal miner, la, 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 la. So that's a little bit of a complaint.
It's definitely not the most impressionable albums that I've heard where it strikes me immediately on the first listen as even having an immediate favorite or least favorite song. I had to listen to it kind of 5 or 6 times to really kind of pick and choose which songs I like. And I will say it did grow on me, and while it did grow on me, I feel like it's not maybe the most memorable album and wouldn't be the most memorable album for me.
I was struck thinking, man, I can't believe it was as popular as it was. Because I went back and checked myself, we'll talk about it in the story, but this came out a few months before the Oasis debut, Definitely Maybe. I went and listened to that again this week, and I didn't vote for that one to be essential, and I stand by that. But that is just so much more straight down the line. pop music than this is. This is so weird, for lack of a better term. I see more, or I hear more George Harrison in this than I do Lennon and McCartney. And so I had to be impressed by how not lazy they were. And that goes through the songwriting, the guitar playing. Every member of the band, like you said, Chris, I think is doing the work to make things sound interesting, add cool production details, add harmonies. Not lazy is one of the best compliments I can give anything.
Yeah.
But also, Rob, it's charming. There is a certain amount of charm to it that I appreciate.
It is charming. You know what it reminded me of? And this will perhaps cause Chris and other UK listeners to groan. But the obvious comparison that I drew is this is the Kinks to Oasis's Beatles. There's a much more insularity to it. There's more eclecticism. There's maybe even a slightly harder edge in some sense, an angularity to it, and it brought me back to some of the Kinks material. I don't know every single thing from the Kinks catalog, but the Kinks material that I do know, like Village Green.
Oh, you don't know all 35 albums by the Kinks?
I do, because I'm British.
That's part of your exams, right? When
I'm just saying that Oasis started to feel like an unspiced meal by comparison to this. And I get that definitely maybe is not the big Oasis album. I was just really struck by how this was so popular while being so strange.
I thought that Chris, I'm going to piggyback on something you said. I thought that the bass and drums were really great. And there was a lot of like polyrhythmic elements going on. Simple parts laid on top of each other. Like you said, Rob, it's not ever like stock bass line one and stock drum beat one. And so every part felt very thought through. And so I did appreciate that. But on one of the songs we're going to talk about, I'm like, this was so close to, if they had wanted to, sort of dethroning the Oasis dominance that ended up happening after this album came out, if they had just put like a sing-along chorus on it. Like, they have a lot of response parts of the songs where people can kind of chant back a line or something like that, but they don't really have like the soaring chorus that sing-along, soaring kind of one guy in an acoustic guitar can get a whole crowd of people singing it type of choruses. And it's like, man, they were close. It's almost like they could have done it if they wanted to, but they didn't want to, which I kind of respect.
Yeah, it is a different version of crowd interaction. And when I kind of later in the week watched more live tape of them from one of the documentaries I watched, and it was old stuff and it was newer stuff, they have a lot more rock and roll or even punk energy in the live show. There's a lot of bouncing around. The crowd is bouncing off each other. They're shouting back at them, like you said. And it just really drove home that the songs are built for a different kind of crowd interaction. You're right. It's not hold up your lighter and sing the big swinging melody like Oasis.
Yeah, it sort of lands like the ones that really came through, because they were satirizing a lot of working class situations, because they were kind of art school. I mean, Damon was, he was born in East London and he did go to a state comprehensive. So there's a sort of authenticity there. But they sort of represented, against Oasis, they sort of represented that sort of art school, slightly more bookish. You'd imagine Graham Coxon would have like a copy of Jack Kerouac in his back pocket, whereas that Liam Gallagher just fucking wouldn't.
Yeah, it's like books.
So there was a big difference between those people. Yeah, those people that listened to those two different bands were slightly... they were different tribes. And I think that's just really clear in what those songs are. But they were satirizing the people that actually ended up really liking the songs, like Parklife and Girls and Boys. And as you said, they didn't know the whole song like you do with an Oasis track. It would just, like Parklife, or you'd know like Girls Who Like Boys, and then you'd run out of words and it's something like Girls and Boys Who Like Boys Who Like Girls Who Like, so it's like a pub rant rather than, as you say, you put it way better than me, the sort of lighter in the air moment.
I got to say, I don't know if it was the cultural context or the accent, but I have no fucking idea what he's talking about in this album at all. I tried to understand it, and I think I got maybe one or two of the songs, but otherwise I was definitely like, I don't know, man. I don't know. You're just making like Charlie Brown mouth sounds at me. Wah, 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 wah.
It's definitely about being English in this deep way that I can tell I'm not getting a lot of it, for sure.
Did you get any of what the stories were?
After I dug in, I think I got some of the stories about English people going on holiday and about this class of people who hangs out in the park drinking or exercising, this kind of working class element of life in the, dare I say, Village Green. It's sort of a little like that, right? But I'm sure you're going to supply much more context than I could ever muster, Chris.
No, you're very close there, Rob.
It's not about guns, beer, and cars. So as an American, I don't know what you're talking about.
You just switch off.
Yeah. Go listen to some Kid Rock.
One other kind of musical element that I wanted to touch on is the horn arrangements that happen throughout the album are very well done.
Yeah.
They almost like surprise you when they come in. You're just like, holy shit, that's a beautiful little arrangement. And so, yeah, more of that. And actually, I ended up going and listening to the album that came out after this, and I was like, I hope this one's on the list because I was really digging it.
It's not, but this is sort of considered the second in a trilogy, and the one before it is on the list. And these 3 albums are, by some, considered their trilogy about English life. And yeah, I totally agree. There's a depth here. We're going to learn in the story that these guys are multi-instrumentalists, and we're helping to produce this, and that's ultimately why I enjoyed it. Now, whether it's essential or not is a little bit of a different question. We're going to dive into that through the course of our story tonight, and we are going to get to that background of Blur and the album Parklife in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. And we're back. So, before we hop in, I just wanted to give a very quick bibliography. When I remember to do this, I like to tell you guys about it. For all the ink that has been spilled on this band over the years, I found the research this week kind of difficult, actually. I even read Alex, the bass player's memoir, and it didn't have a lot of details, to be honest with you. And I watched a documentary called No Distance Left to Run, which was made in celebration of them reuniting in the late 2000s, plus plenty of anniversary oral histories of the album and things like that. So that's where I'm drawing a lot of this stuff from. Okay, let's kick off our story of the band Blur by talking about the life of lead singer and lyricist for the band, Damon Albarn. He's born in London in 1968 to bohemian parents, including his father, who is an accomplished visual artist who also briefly managed the band Soft Machine. Interesting little anecdote about his dad. Okay. And his dad ended up running an art school himself. So his parents are cultured as fuck. They spend their time on long holidays in Turkey. They listen to African music and Indian ragas. But Damon's real musical moment comes at age 6 when he attends a show by the Osmonds. And we're talking about the Osmond brothers now. This is before Donny Osmond broke away. Very, very hip stuff. So seriously, I looked it up, though. The Osmonds have sold like 77 million records worldwide. So who's really laughing?
Crazy Horses. Brilliant album.
Yeah, okay, well, we're going to get that one soon, I hope. After that lightning bolt moment, he dives into music head first, including lessons in guitar, violin, piano. But perhaps most importantly, he's interested from this early age in composing music. He even gets pretty far in a Young Composer of the Year national competition when he's a little kid. So flash forward a little bit to secondary school, which is kind of like middle school in America, in Colchester, which is a ways northeast, I believe, of London, kind of the deep suburbs there. He meets Graham Coxon, future Blur guitarist.
Chris, please feel free to jump in and correct Rob's pronunciation whenever appropriate.
This is going to occur later, don't worry. It's not bad so far. I think it's Damon Albarn.
It's not Albarn. It's Al.
I mean, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
Doesn't make me right.
Albarn, gotcha.
Right.
I appreciate it. I love being corrected by anyone but Tom. So he meets Graham in secondary school. They bond over the Beatles, over XTC, and over bands like The Specials, who we've covered here on the show. Graham talks about how when he first noticed Damon, it was because he was in a production of West Side Story at school, singing the song Officer Krupke. And Graham says that at that moment he thought, wow, he's really confident. And also, wow, he's such a show-off. So let's talk about Graham for a second. Go back in his life. He's, the guitar player in this band. He was born in West Germany on an army base where his dad was stationed and was working as a clarinetist and band leader in the British Army. So also musical parents. Graham, by the time he meets Damon, is playing saxophone and clarinet in addition to guitar, all of which he plays on tonight's album, Parklife. So they become fast friends. They collaborate for a couple years on demos and songwriting together, and then they go off to college. Graham off to London to a really prestigious art school called Goldsmith, and Damon initially to drama school because he thinks he's going to be an actor. They both wanted to do more with music, and even as they separated, they were talking about getting back together with music at some point in the future. So they each keep kind of playing around with different people and different versions of a band, meeting up what they can when they can. Damon meets drummer Dave Roundtree, also from the same area that these guys are from, Colchester, and after a couple practices, Graham joins that band, and together they form a band called Circus. Now, Dave's the drummer in Blur. He's also born to musical parents. All these guys have a musical lineage. Dave's mom is or was a viola player, and his dad was a sound engineer at the BBC. So you're starting to get a sense of how these people really had a solid musical education coming into this, right? So now we have 3 out of the 4 members who have joined up in the group early in college, let's say. And shortly thereafter, the final piece of the puzzle comes into the picture. His name is Alex James. He was originally inspired to start playing music, he says, after being homesick with chickenpox when John Lennon was killed in 1980. And as a result, he ends up watching a ton of Beatles VHS tapes around the house and seeing the newsreels. He runs into Graham when he first arrives in London. They become fast friends. He hears a demo of this band, Circus, the band with the 3 other members of Blur in it, and he apparently tells Graham that he thinks it's shit, which is some way to make friends. To hear him tell it, it was too drama college, and it needed to be more art college, whatever that means.
Lesser of two evils, isn't it?
Indeed. So a couple weeks later, as it turns out, Circus sacks their bass player, and they invite Alex to join the band. Now, at this point, they change their name to Seymour after a J.D. Salinger short story. It's a terrible name. And they play their first show in the summer of 1988. And within a couple months of that, there's interest from a record called Food Records.
I'm still just reeling from the total power move of being like, your band fucking sucks. Anyway, have me be the bass player. Like, nobody gets to pull that off. How do you make that work?
Especially not a bass player, you know?
Yeah, right?
He's taller than everyone else. That's why.
I was going to say, these guys are generally much more handsome than Oasis. I would say Damon is pretty good looking kid, and Alex kind of looks like a male model, in my opinion, at least when he was young.
Alex was the one that all the girls really fancied. And Damon had the sort of cheeky chappy. Dave was, I don't know, wouldn't recognise him in a lineup. And Graham Coxon never lifted his head up.
Right. So I think that had to have been a factor here, right?
So you're telling me that if I become better looking, I can be more of an asshole as a bass player?
That's correct.
Right,
hey, that's
good
life.
enough.
That's life, Tom.
That is pretty true.
So Food Records is a small label that at the time had a band on their label that was picking up heat, and they're about to have a big hit in the US of A. I'm sure you all know, but I am talking about Jesus Jones.
Oh, right here, right now?
The song was called Right Here, Right Now. That's correct, which I had completely scrubbed from my memory until this week. But it was a hit. It's true. It was a hit in the US.
It was a huge hit in the UK.
And you guys say you have better taste than us. Come on.
I didn't say I liked it. I said it was a huge hit.
So in any case, the label is interested. I'm always fascinated by how quickly bands are able to pick up label interest. And their only condition really is that they change the name of the band. So according to Alex now, they had the band themselves and the label each went off and made a list of 10 new names, and that Blur was on both lists. So they immediately chose it. Either that or the label came up with it themselves and the band chose it. I heard differing stories there, but in Alex's memoir, that is what he said.
Not a bad band name.
No.
Yeah, it's a great name, I think. Yeah, it's way better than Seymour. Although actually Circus probably describes the music a little more than either of these other names.
Yeah, but Circus makes me think it's going to be like a prog band or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a King Crimson album is called Circus.
Yeah.
So
That's probably why. Yeah, there you go.
There's a Lenny Kravitz album, Circus, as well, which came out around about the same time.
Oh, yeah, that album's not very good either.
Yeah, I got to throw up in my mouth a few times before we continue. So Blur start getting a little traction in Britain. They first get booked to go on tour opening for the Cramps, it's a big deal for them at the time. They come back, they release their first single. It's called She's So High. It charts at number 48, which is respectable, but nothing special. And for the follow-up single, they get paired with a guy called Stephen Street, who you might remember as the guy who produced everyone on the show's favorite, The Smiths.
Oh, yes.
I love the Smiths.
I know you do, Marty. Of course you love the Smiths.
I love the Smiths too.
Yeah, they're amazing.
That's why the next time I got to work with the Albinator psychically, so that the next time the Smiths come up, Marty is on the show with me, so that we could gang up on Tom. Anyway, the resulting song of working with Stephen Street initially, who ends up working with the band continuously through Parklife, and he's the producer or co-producer on this album as well. But the resulting song is called "There's No Other Way." That one gets higher in the UK charts, goes to number 8. This is what brings them their first real media attention in the UK. This is 1991 now. So again, pretty early in this decade called the 90s. And when I say media attention, they had enough clout to get into nightclubs around London and misbehave a little bit. And they sort of get their first taste of fame, right? The resulting debut album called Leisure drops and peaks at number 7 on the album charts in the UK, even though it's getting mixed reviews by critics. Now, the band isn't crazy about the album because they didn't really feel like they had a strong hand in making it. They felt like the record company pushed them a little bit to be another cookie cutter band, similar to the bands that were popular coming out of Manchester, the so-called Madchester movement. And Blur, on the other hand, see themselves as artists, as we've already alluded to, and want to expand the sound and be a lot more experimental. But that said, in 1991, that was still relatively unheard of. There was still a strong dividing line between indie and popular bands. And it's been said on this show, as well as many other places, that Nirvana's Nevermind in late 1991 is the moment when indie becomes mainstream, right? But the reality is it took a few years for that idea to cross the pond and to pollinate all these other scenes. And it took bands like Blur helping, I think, to blaze that trail over the next couple of years. So say what you will about what we get on the tape. I do get from this story that they are a part of pushing forward a band-led version of creativity in the 90s.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is it was one of the first. I was just at that time where I had pocket money. I must have been like, what was I, like 17 or 18? And a lot of people bought that album, Leisure. And There's No Other Way is, I still think, a brilliant track. I think it's one of their best ones. It was one of the first ones that everyone started to know and everyone started to take notice of them.
So were they playing around a lot? Like, would you go and see them at the time?
Yeah. They were known for doing like really good gigs. I think, maybe Marty, you said, is their gigs were a lot more punk than the songs might lead you to believe. Damon was always stage diving and throwing himself around. And, it was a sort of hot, sweaty Camden pub band sort of feel to it.
Nice.
And there was a fair amount of smashing up instruments and things like that. I heard Graham say that in those early days, they'd have 10 songs in the set, but they'd only get through 6 of them because Damon had thrown himself on the chords and unplugged stuff and knocked over amps and, drum stands.
Alex James was just protecting his face because it was so beautiful.
Exactly. So back to the band, right? With all their high-minded ideas about changing music, by 1992, they find themselves 60,000 pounds in debt from a shady band manager who either bungled or stole from them. And the label says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to send you on tour in America to make a little cash. Touring around America for the first time ever, the land they've dreamed of conquering and becoming famous in, it quickly becomes a low point for the band. They aren't getting the reception they'd like. Their album is not selling in America. Their hits have not made it to American radio. And they're fighting amongst themselves. They're poor, as I mentioned. And they feel that they're fighting a losing war.
Rob, do you happen to know if they were headlining or if they were supporting?
I'm almost certain they were not headlining. I do not know who they were supporting at that time.
It's funny. I saw this described as the record label sent them to America because they were like, you can sell T-shirts to them. They will buy T-shirts. Americans have no fashion sense, so just go sell a bunch of T-shirts. That'll get you out of debt. The T-shirt margins are fantastic.
But what really happens is they're also afraid that while they're touring around America on a tour bus, that their star in the UK, small as it might be, but significant, is dimming really fast. And of course, they're also homesick, right? Because it's their first time so far away from home. So as a result, Damon starts writing songs about English life. And this becomes the next set of songs for the subsequent albums up through Parklife and beyond, as you'll see. So when they get back, they see that rival band, already mentioned by Chris, Suede, has bounced ahead of them in both fame and recognition. Now, here's another band that is perhaps sadly unknown in the US. They also have 2 albums on the 1001 list.
Of course.
Right? I don't think I know a note of their music. I could be wrong. I didn't review every tune. But the bottom line is Blur are in danger of getting dropped by the label at this point. The label doesn't really trust that they can get to profitability as a band, and it sounds like the label behind the scenes isn't being handled so well anyway. In a few short years, or maybe even less than a few short years, they're going to get bought out by EMI. So they do allow them to make a second record. It's called Modern Life is Rubbish, and it comes out in 1992. It is not well reviewed either. It's too weird, people say. They lean into letting the band do more of what they want, and some of the critics think it's too weird. It also does not crack the US Billboard 200 like they had hoped it would, but the band is ultimately very happy with it. They think it's a much better representation of what they want to do, and they say, fuck it, let's double down, and let's head right back into the studio to continue on this theme. And that theme, what's really important here is that they've rebranded themselves a bit as being a British band talking about England specifically. So I should also mention that Modern Life is Rubbish is also on the 1001 list. We'll get to that another time. But, you know, really what's been happening, and these records are almost a pair because like I said, they don't even go on tour for that. They go right back into the studio and start making Parklife. But what's really important to note is that even though they haven't been critically that well received, even in their home of the UK, they've had some moderate chart success. But what they are doing is they're building a live fan base. Right? The live audience is getting into it. It's growing. We just talked about how exciting their shows were, how energetic they were. And so even though the larger public maybe hasn't embraced them yet and the critics haven't embraced them just yet, they're building some steam that way.
I think also the CDs were pretty much at a peak then. And the sound quality from that and the fact that you could sort of just about afford it meant that a lot of people were buying the music as opposed to necessarily having the money to go to a gig or having the transport to be able to get to a gig. So, you know, every person's house who you went to, they had a copy of Leisure. Sorry, we say Leisure. I know I say Leisure. Leisure or Modern Life is Rubbish, and then ultimately Parklife as well. People would just have them. It was one of those albums that you just had, you know.
Yeah, and I got the impression that by the time Parklife comes out, that the critics felt like they had maybe missed the boat and they were scrambling to catch up and say, no, actually they're great. Because by that time, the public had embraced them. They were a force live, and then they all stars aligned and they started to sell records, right, in a really serious way at that point. So, you know, Tom mentioned this in his tweet, but an anecdote from back in 1990, even before their first record comes out, is when Damon tells some journalists, when our third album comes out, we will take our place as the quintessential English band of the 90s. That's a statement of fact. I intend to write it in 1994. Just a weird thing to say, regardless of how you think it worked out.
That's the ramblings of a fucking crazy person. Like a crazy person says that. That's like Kanye West or Hitler or something like that, you know?
Yeah, but the thing is, no one would remember it if it didn't come true, you know?
Yeah.
You can say shit like that. If it doesn't come true, no one's writing it down and holding you to it, you know?
Probably. But in the moment, they're definitely like, who is this jackass? What the fuck is wrong with
It's a
this
pretty
guy?
good gamble that did kind of pay off, though, you know.
Yeah.
It did. And the guy sold millions of records under 2 different band names.
Yeah.
So
I'm putting it out there right now. 3 years from now, Rob and I are going to write the quintessential fast food album of the 2020s.
So the band wants to go right back into the studio, but Food Records isn't sure they want a third album, right? But EMI, a much larger company that owns a stake in the label and is going to end up buying them out within a year or two anyway, like I mentioned, they greenlight the Parklife project. At this point, Food Records, though, is insisting that the band demo every song and send it over for approval by the label before doing the official recording, which is nuts.
Yeah. Why are they having them do that? That seems like a more expensive way to go about it.
It really does, and it also seems like the band circumvented it on a number of occasions. But
fair enough.
But also, I think record labels at that point thought that they were the magicians because, you know, every so often you'd come up with a band like whether it was Pulp or Suede and whichever AR man, you know, after 15 bags of Coke decided to make them famous. They thought they could do anything. Send us the demos and we'll tell you what's fucking good music. That kind of idea.
Well, and honestly, that trend got worse as you moved on into like the late 90s where they were legitimately like, we're just putting together a band. We got all the songs. We got some guy from Sweden writing the songs. Give me a pretty face that can dance. And now we're making the band.
I'd say it's a step up from having to actually show up in person with your guitar and perform the songs in front of the A&R guys before getting record approval, which is like what they did back in like the Bob Dylan days, right?
Fair enough. But I think in general, the message of history says leave creativity to the creatives. If you trust them to do something, let them do what they're going to do, right? You meddling, design by committee never works, basically. So to the band's mind, it felt like their style of witty, weird pop music hadn't found its time just yet. But the world is starting to turn. They had a great set at the Reading Festival in the summer of 1993. Just before starting in on the album, the crowd was going nuts. The press starts to get excited about them again. They pick up a little steam again in the press. Maybe the press even starts to acknowledge that perhaps they'd missed the boat on the previous stuff and begins doing a pre-course correction for whatever they were about to release next to get on the hipness train. And part of what helps this along is other bands coming through at this time. Oasis are gigging around, but they haven't released their debut yet. But there are, as we've mentioned, are bands like Pulp and Elastica and Supergrass and Suede, and all these bands are popping off, right? And as an American, you might be like, huh? I don't know any of these bands. But quick check of the 1001 list tells me that between bands Pulp, Alaska, and Supergrass, there are a collective 5 albums on the list.
Yeah, I went through that list actually, and I was pretty impressed with that. Like Suede is on there, and Suede, you know, you said that you wouldn't know a Suede song. You're probably right, but neither did that many people in Britain. They just knew that the lead singer was like this sort of foppish-haired kind of androgynous artist. So. Yeah, I don't know what the point of that was.
That's just because I haven't heard it means nothing about its quality, to be clear. We started the podcast in part to hear more music we hadn't heard, but it is interesting that we continually are reminded how much of its own ecosystem the UK is, and that all these great bands that I wouldn't say I'm familiar with any of them are at this level of being lauded, right? Pulp has 2 albums on the list. Elastica has an album on the list. Supergrass has 2 albums on the list. Suede has 2 albums on the list. These were never phenomenons in America. I mean, I've heard these names, of course.
It's the first time I've ever heard of any of those.
No, Elastica had that hit Connection that you've heard.
Make the right connection, the writing on the wall.
No.
Stumble You Might Fall.
Stereo MCs.
Stereo MCs, okay.
Marty, what about Manic Street Preachers?
Oh, we talked about them before, right? I have heard them.
No, they definitely did not make it to the U.S. Elastica, these other bands, Pulp, Alaska, and Supergrass, I have definitely heard of them, but I can't say I'm familiar with them.
Well, you're lost, guys. You're lost. That's what I'm saying.
I'm excited to get into them. I'm simply talking about living through this period in the 90s and being in high school. In America, they were names I heard, but not records I heard necessarily on MTV, or at least only sporadically. So point is, Blur go in and begin recording at a place called Maison Rouge in London in August of 1993. The sessions last through February of 1994. Again, the band had to submit demos to be approved by the label, but producer Stephen Street was quoted as saying that ended up really being helpful for the band. The demo process was annoying, but it was a helpful step in developing the songs. And some of the demos themselves ended up being B-sides or things that came out later. Like, they got really good at making demos. That's the upside.
They left things off of this album? It seems like they crammed every goddamn thing they could into it.
It was supposed to be a double album. They had enough material for two CDs, I believe.
Good Lord.
I buy it. And it is a little bloated. I would have to agree with that criticism, but I do think a lot of it is cool. So one spot where it created some undue pressure was on the title track. The label instantly called the demo out as a potential single, and the band really struggled to then record it properly and effectively bring it home. Now, 2 key things helped bring it home and make it a lasting hit, and it is currently their most played track from the album on Spotify. So they had originally brought in an actor, a guy called Phil Daniels, who played the lead in one of their favorite movies called Quadrophenia, to read a poem over a different track called The Debt Collector, which is sort of merry-go-round music or something. And that ended up as an instrumental. And in the studio, they said, let's give this guy a chance on the verses of Parklife, so that he ends up on the track.
By the way, I saw a great interview with Phil Daniels where he basically was like, yeah, they offered me like a couple of $100 to do it. And I was like, just give me a cut on the back end. And like, if it turns into something, it turns into something. And he's like, I mean, I'm not like a billionaire because of it, but that was a very, very good choice. And they said the other thing is that Damon just has said you have an open invitation to come and sing this song whenever you want. So when they're going to go on tour, he'll just like send him the schedule. And if there's any countries that look cool, like he wants to visit, he'll just be like, oh yeah, I'll come open up a couple of shows in Tokyo with you. And like, he's like, yeah, I got to travel the entire world just because of this. I just come up, I sing one song, and then I get to hang out. It's great.
You're right. And that is a great example of a song where the entire audience is shouting back at them.
Yeah.
Like it's intense, right? The other thing that I thought was an interesting musical detail was that something that had been bothering Damon about when they were trying to record the track was how uptight it was. And he chalks this up to the drummer keeping time too well. I'm sure Marty's heard this complaint many times in the studio as a drummer.
More the other way, where I'm not keeping time too well, which trust me is a bigger problem.
It's an interesting insight because ultimately what he says is, let's do another take, but you keep it way looser. Like I want you to keep less good time.
I've heard that so many times, and I fucking hate when people say that. Like, I'm not fucking Art Blakey.
I feel like I've already had 6 beers, man. How much more loose you want me to get?
Yeah.
Anyway, I just like that part of the anecdote because it does say something about what quality means, and it's not about perfect execution, at least not necessarily, and it did become a huge hit, obviously. So they're still working with Stephen Street, the guy they made the last 2 records with. He says the big breakthrough moment came when Damon brings in a demo to the studio one day that he did at home, all by himself, for a dance track called Girls and Boys. And Stephen Street, I think smartly, suggests that they avoid the live band entirely and do a straight classic disco track arrangement here. So they talked about how at the time, at least in their minds, the only dance music happening in the UK was house music, which was at higher tempos, or a kind of loping hip-hop type dance music coming out of Manchester. And so what they wanted to do was make something more classic. They set the drum machine, the BPM at 120, the Staying Alive BPM, the classic disco beat, and that's what we get in Girls and Boys. And in fact, this is one of the ones where they skipped the authorization process and just laid down the track because the inspiration struck them. And it sounds like they were literally getting a call every single night from the label going like, what'd you work on that day? I need your studio diary.
Oh my God, I would have fucking murdered somebody.
A common thing though, is it? Is it a common thing? I've never heard that of having. I mean, I sort of get the idea they want to be across it. But...
I've never heard of that either.
That's really micromanaging. I think it's one thing for a label to be asking for updates and wanting to hear demos of the songs. I mean, it's the same with like a film production, right? But to literally be calling every day. And Steven, in an oral history, said that after the day they worked on that song, and everyone there was really excited about it. They're like, this is a really good song. We're really excited about this. He tells the label guy at the end of the day, hey, we worked on this tune. And the guy just says, you haven't been authorized to work on that track.
Oh, wow. Good Lord.
What an asshole. So the band and their producer, Stephen Street, were convinced Girls and Boys was a hit. And of course, they ended up being right. It ends up being the lead single on Parklife and the opening track. And it becomes their first top 5 hit in the UK. And it sounds like even more importantly at the time, it helped give the band a lot of confidence that they could take on these different genres and put their own stamp on them and still be successful and still be at the core what they were as a band. So in Damon's mind, I think what's happening here is that he's loosely stringing together a lot of different styles of British music of years past, from Sex Pistols, punk, to Syd Barrett, early Pink Floyd weirdness, all the way back to waltzing beer hall kind of music, oompa, right? And that said, we've already said it ourselves, the record is a little bit disjointed. Some reviewers called it out for being that. Robert Christgau went as far as to say Girls and Boys is the only good song on the record. And I don't agree with him, but you could see how that it's a little bit of a misleading opening track, right?
Sure. I mean, it's also not a good song, so like I don't understand.
Yeah, let's not give it away because I fucking hate it.
They finished Parklife. The band's happy with it. Food Records is not. They literally say to the band, this is a mistake. And that brings us to our favorite segment here on the show. It is Parklife by the numbers.
Let's do it.
First number I want to throw out to you is number 1. Parklife gets released in the UK on April 25th, 1994, and lands immediately at number 1 on the album charts. This came out of the gate hot. They sold 27,000 copies in the first week. It picks up steam from there. And keep in mind, again, this is a few months before Definitely Maybe, the Oasis debut, which is going to come out late in the summer of 1994. The next number I want to tell you about, though, is 94, as in Parklife stayed in the top 100 album charts in the UK from that point for 94 weeks continuously.
Damn.
It also popped up a handful of times over the coming years for a grand total of 120 weeks in the album charts. Next number I want to give to you is 1.2 million. Parklife sold 1.2 million units in the UK alone, which makes it quadruple platinum based on the UK's population.
God damn. Did it even go gold in the US?
I don't think it did.
Yeah, I don't think it even got gold in the US.
Blur will eventually get some level of comeuppance in the US. We'll talk about that a little later in the story, but it's not happening here. And the last number I want to throw out to you is 32. The number of times they say the word girls or boys in the lead single of Girls and Boys. It is a lot. But I should point out that the album spawned 3 more top 20 singles after that one.
That amount of binariness would not be accepted in today's society.
I'm going to dig deeper into that, Marty, when we do the breakdown of the tracks, because I've got big issues with that.
All right, we're going to get into that track, and I actually do have one last number for you. It is 0, as in not even for 1 second do we get miffed when you get into those comment threads or in our email inbox and tell us what we got wrong or what we mispronounced. You're also welcome to tell us, of course, what we got right. There's a comment thread going right now over on Patreon. It's free. Sign up, hop in there. Continue this conversation with us, with your fellow complainers. We love seeing that community growing week over week. We want to hear more from you on the episodes and the albums and anything else that's on your mind. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, back to Blur. Parklife, huge success in the UK. And with the Oasis debut also making a big splash later that year, music writers are starting to write about the scene and dubbing it Brit-Pop. Now, like most genre tags, this is wholly invented by critics, as far as I can tell, not by the bands themselves, who don't particularly care for it. Reviews are mostly positive in the UK for Parklife. NME calls it a great pop record that on paper sounds like hell, but in practice it's joyous. And even Rolling Stone in the US gives it a pretty good review, calling it one of this year's best albums.
In 94.
In 94. Blur, as a live band, are drawing bigger and bigger crowds. There is absolutely no chance their label will drop them now, and Parklife ends up winning the Brit Award for British Album of the Year. In fact, the band sweeps the awards that year. And while accepting an award on stage, Damon improvisationally says that Oasis ought to share the award. I think he probably wishes he didn't say that.
Yeah, I would love to see an interaction between those two bands, because these guys seem like kind of nice dudes, and Oasis were kind of known for being fucking cunts.
Yeah, Liam be like, of course we should. Of course we deserve half of that award.
Well, I'm going to tell you about some of those interactions. So Blur are, of course, aware of Oasis. They're friendly, but they're from different parts of the country. As Chris already told us, Manchester is quite far away from London, after all. And they're also at different stages of their band's lifetime, right? Blur is already on their 3rd album. Oasis is just releasing their debut. There's differences there. I'll even say that, and I believe it was much later, Noel Gallagher called Parklife Southern England personified in an interview. I think he was attempting to be complimentary. Now, there is even a possibly apocryphal anecdote about how one of the tracks on Definitely Maybe, a song called Digsy's Diner, is intended as a direct dig at Blur. It sounds like once Oasis got a dose of fame, they immediately started talking shit about Blur every chance they got, calling Blur not rock and roll and more like, quote, chimney sweeping music.
Oh, God.
They say he's like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins or something.
Well, that's why I was laughing, because Chris mentioned that in his tweet length review. But yeah, they really didn't mince words. Damon, to his part, says that Oasis were like the bullies he had to put up with at school.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The following year, Oasis are already working on their follow-up, What's the Story, Morning Glory, and Blur are working on the follow-up to Parklife. When Blur gets word that the first single, Oasis's first single, is about to get released, he nudges the label to bump up Blur's new single release to the same exact day. And the press picks up on it. NME picks up on these dual release dates, starts calling it the Big Chart Showdown. National News picks up on it. It becomes big news. And who won, you ask?
Let me guess.
Blur won.
Oh, really? Okay.
Their single outsold Oasis. This Oasis single was called Roll With It. They apparently weren't busting out the big guns yet of Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova. But their single was called Roll With It. The Blur song Country House outsold Oasis. But of course, we know Oasis ultimately won the war with those subsequent singles. I just mentioned they conquered America, and now we all live under the vice grip of their tyrannical reign. Blur acknowledged even then, by the way, that this was a hollow victory. They didn't really care that much about the charts, although Damon did move the release dates around, to be fair. And one more note, I think this is the last one. A month or so later, Noel Gallagher, who everyone agrees is just lovely to work with, told a journalist that he hoped the pair of them, meaning Damon and Graham, catch AIDS and die because I fucking hate them too.
Wow. I wonder what he really meant by that, you know?
This is like peak AIDS, too.
So tension remained between the bands for years after this, but eventually did seem to dissipate as Noel joined Blur on stage in 2013 for a benefit show. And in the last couple years, which has seen both bands reunite, play huge shows, Damon admitted happily that Oasis has won. They won everything. You know, he's over it for sure. I can't say as much about the Gallagher brothers. I really don't know. Says Graham Coxon in Reflection. He said, what Oasis didn't get from the Beatles was that you could learn everything. R&B, blues, music hall, folk, classical music, even a bit of grunge. You could get a massive education from the Beatles, not just big blocks of chords and sing-alongs. And honestly, I think he has a great point.
Yeah, I agree. At no point during this album was I like, oh, this is a little one note. That definitely, when I listen to Oasis albums, I'm like, I get it. Brick wall of guitar coming at me. Let's dial it down a little bit.
Totally.
I don't think you can quite underestimate how much of a big deal this was nationally. It was, everybody was talking about it for the week up to the chart show, what was on BBC Radio 1. The countdown was on a Sunday evening, and we knew that this head-to-head was coming. And it was probably more than 7 days, but I remember being at work, and those 7 days leading up to that countdown was all that anyone talked about in the bars in London. It was all they talked about. And it's very difficult because I can't think after that ever happened again. And everyone was listening to the radio. And again, it comes down to that sort of communal experience of waiting to hear who hit number one. It was. Yeah. I remember it really, really clearly. It was crazy.
Yeah, I imagine the rivalry ends up being beneficial for both bands.
Definitely. Yeah, I was gonna say you can imagine like a lot of Londoners being like, we got to make sure Blur beats Oasis. We got to go out and buy that record. You know.
Yeah, because it was all based on sales, right?
Yeah, it was purely based on sales. There was no streaming. There was no sort of opinion piece. It was literally units shifted.
Yeah. So from here, Blur releases their fourth album. The follow-up to Parklife. It's called The Great Escape, to mostly very good reviews now. Retrospectively, people say it's the third installment of a trilogy about English life, of which Parklife is the second one. But compared to the smash worldwide success of Oasis's What's the Story, Morning Glory, which went 4 times platinum in the US alone, they're quickly seen as has-beens or maybe never quite was's, even in their homeland. Now, Damon talks about how for a few years after that, wherever he'd go in London, as soon as he'd get recognized, people would rush to start blasting Oasis out of the speakers at him, out of windows on the street where he was walking by or whatever shop he just walked into. He said that stupid joke would play out so many times, and everyone thought they had just thought of it and they were taking the piss. And the press, I think, leaned into it, of course, right? We're saying Oasis being pitched as working class heroes and Blur as art school fakers or something like that. Maybe Chris can speak more to that, how those lines were drawn in the culture at that moment, that it was more than just geographical, right?
Yeah, it was sort of, I'm trying to think of my mates to listen to, because I actually kind of got a bit more behind Oasis just because I felt a bit more listening to them. When they played Nebworth in around about the same time, there's like 250,000 people night after night. I didn't have any money to get a ticket, but I listened to it on the radio, and there was just a sort of collective experience of listening to them play. Whereas Blur wasn't really a collective experience to listen to them play unless you were in the places that they sing about and you start singing Girls Who Like Boys, you know, in a nightclub in Greece. So they had a sort of very different effect. And I don't think it was quite as simple. It was definitely north and south, but I don't think it was art school and sort of working class. I don't know. It's a really tricky one to see where that divide was.
And I'm guessing you would put yourself on the art school side of that argument.
I'm very clearly very incredibly art school. And I was a maverick at my art school because I loved Oasis.
Okay.
Listen, I think Oasis has plenty of merit, but again, I was struck by the contrast in what the two bands are even trying to do. And I think coming in a week ago, I would have assumed they were closer in terms of the kind of music they were even aiming to make.
So I think the conflict came actually between their Blur's kind of slightly more dancier, kind of raucous tracks, rather than the stuff that I actually think is their most beautiful stuff, is the sort of ballads and the strings. I absolutely love those things. I just never really bought the sort of la la oi oi kind of tracks so much.
It's a good thing we invited you here tonight. I'm sure all of London is cheering you on.
I told you, I'm not a fucking cultural historian.
I'm just fucking with you, Chris. We appreciate you being here.
As we said many times, this is album complaints. This is
Exactly.
not praise. Is not a
That's what I'm
requirement.
leading into. I'm leading very heavily into this.
So, in part because of all the negative media attention and because they've been going hard at it for a number of years now, the band's starting to show the strain. Graham is admitted that he's an alcoholic at this point. Dave's getting a divorce. Damon's experimenting with heroin. They're just barely friends anymore. They need a big change. The whole band has been listening to alternative music coming out of America. Bands like Pavement and Beck. And so they decide to change the sound up quite a bit in the next record in an attempt to reset themselves with a visceral, stripped down rock and roll kind of approach. And what comes of that is their fifth album, which they self-title as Blur, and they get their big breakthrough in the States. It's called Song 2. Now, weirdly enough, that's the record we all know from going to high school in the States. In the 90s, it was omnipresent. It was on MTV. That was my introduction to Blur, certainly in high school. Weirdly enough, this record does significantly worse in the UK, or maybe that's not weird. Maybe it's expected. The aggressive approach to rock music isolated a lot of their teenage girl fans in the UK, but it won over the Americans, right?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they wrote that song as sort of like, hey, look how fucking stupid grunge is, right? Like, I don't think that song was written as a serious endeavor. I think it was kind of taking the piss out of grunge.
I think that's accurate. In terms of that song specifically, it was a very purposely dumbed down version of rock. But I did hear them complimenting particularly Stephen Malkmus as a guitar player and just being inspired by some of the quote-unquote indie music that was coming out of America and thinking it was creative and interesting and being inspired by that. So I haven't taken in that record all the way, but they were playing off of those tropes. So we got one last story beat here. They did make another record as a group. Then Damon and Graham have a falling out. Graham leaves the group. They made one album without him. They ultimately reunite like 7 years later in 2008, play Glastonbury. But perhaps the most significant thing to happen musically after this, we've already mentioned it a couple times, is that Damon started collaborating with a visual artist and then rooming with him after a highly publicized breakup with the lead singer of Elastica. And together they form a virtual band called Gorillaz, whose 2001 debut sold 7 million copies worldwide. And then the follow-up, Demon Days, sold 8 million copies. So we're going to get to that band another day because that debut album is also on the 1001 list.
Yeah. And isn't this where the rumors that Damon is Banksy kind of started? That he is, it's either, I think there's a rumor that it's maybe him and Jamie Hewitt.
Jamie Hewlett.
Yeah. Jamie Hewlett. I think there's a rumor that maybe they are both Banksy and that's how they maintain the illusion.
Interesting.
That because it's not, something happened when one of them wasn't there,
Oh, I've never heard that one.
I haven't heard that one either. I always thought, long ago now, I'm not up on this, but long ago I read a internet sleuth breaking down why it was the guy from Massive Attack.
Interesting. It also could be a bunch of them collectively all together, just, which sounds fun as hell.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of amazing that Banksy even has a secret identity in today's world. I mean, that is impressive just on its face.
Yeah.
Very art school.
That is the song. He's definitely art school. That is the end of our story about Blur. Shall we move into talking about some of the songs? My lads.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's dive into the tracks. Let's play another clip of the opening track and the lead single. It's called
When I read the anecdote from Alex James that he was like, I wanted to be in Duran Duran. I was like, oh, there we go. That's the Duran Duran bass sound on there. Like it's pretty good. It's got a kick and bass. I have no fucking idea again what he's talking about. I was like, am I supposed to understand what this chorus means? Is this some cultural touchstone that I'm missing?
Well, I think what's interesting about it is I did actually break it down because I've never really listened to the lyrics with real precision. and it doesn't really make any sense because it doesn't it doesn't seem to have. I rewrote the chorus, making it really clear what it means, and it should be boys who like girls, who dig girls like they're girls, who do boys when they're drunk, who have bum sex with girls. Always should be someone who you ghost the minute you get home. That didn't scan so well. I literally sat down for half an hour and sort of broke that down. That's good.
You know, in all honesty, I definitely was like, I don't know what he's talking about, but it sounds like a fuck fest. So, you know, good on him.
It's kind of like a cheap jab at a popular song. We're just like, let's write the most catchy, danceable thing we can come up with and put it as the first song of our album. And it works. It's just so goddamn repetitive.
Yeah.
It's just never ending.
I made a note that they did the Jeff Lynne from ELO thing where they're like, we've already done the chorus too many times, but we still have like a minute and a half of the song left. What are we going to do? Drop the instruments, only drums, vocal chorus, and then right back into the chorus with the instruments. I'm like, God damn, dude, you just played the chorus like 9 times in a row. I can't take that anymore.
Listen, I will agree that the chorus is the part I like least about the song. It's meant to be shouts sung at you by a crowd of drunks, off key, and that is not really speaking to me. But I will also say that I think I found plenty to like about it. I, of course, was familiar with the song on a basic radio or mixtape kind of level, but listening to it closely, I think it's just cooler than I was expecting it to be. There's more angularity. There's more little touches like the guitar doing the airplane dive bomb in the hard right speaker. Even the main rhythm guitar is just weirder than it needs to be and more off kilter than I would have expected. The bass is cool. So I'm here for it. And one of the things I really was struck by this week was it sounds to me so much more modern than 1994. Like if you told me this came out in 2004 amidst the Franz Ferdinands and the Killers and that kind of stuff, that would make a ton of sense to me. But it feels really early in that lineage.
It's funny because on the playlist it says 2012 remaster, and without doing too much research, I was like, oh, this is from 2012. Makes sense. You know, like Daft Punk and this, you know, head to head.
You know, I got some, it's going to sound maybe a little off base, but I get a little like 9 Inch Nails vibes. There's a couple of tracks on here where I'm like, oh,
yeah,
it's like 9 Inch Nails if Trent Reznor wasn't pissed off all the time. Because there's a little bit of like weird kind of like...
Yeah, it's like 9 Inch Nails on ecstasy.
Yeah.
I could kind of hear that, yeah.
I'd kind of like to hear it without the... I'm sure that's the easy way to do this, without the vocal line. Because again, I think it just comes back to Graham Coxon's like attacking to just the choppiness of what he's playing and just the way he approaches solos really with like an atonal head on it. So it doesn't do anything that's expected, but also doesn't feel like kind of wanky noodling either. It feels like he's got a real perspective.
I agree. I think there's a lot of little hidden melodies in here. That's really what I'm saying, is that it exceeded my expectation. I did not think I liked the song from knowing it from casual listening, and I found a lot more to like about it. And in that way, I think it's a subversive dance song. Okay, but interestingly, I believe I read that they used the drum machine, not the drummer, but they overdubbed cymbals.
Yeah, it all sounds like Drum Machine to me.
Yeah. But I think Dave Rowntree said that it is his favorite Blur song because he's not on it, which I thought was a very like British thing to say. It's my favorite one because I don't fuck it up by being on it. Like that's great.
Who played the cymbals then?
That's a good question. They're all multi-instrumentalists, you know.
All right. Let's keep it rolling here. Let's go on to the next song. It's called End.
It's got all the things I like. It's got the harmonies that I talked about in the beginning of the show. It's got the beautiful horn arrangement. It's got a mellotron in the beginning and throughout the song, which I love. And it's just got some good oohs and ahs. And this is the most Oasis sounding song on the album that I could find.
I said this one was like mid-career Beatles. You know, they kind of got a little bit of the more traditional song structure, but they're breaking away from it and doing some interesting things around the edges of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I looked at it as, again, I'm being really nasty, which is weird because I really do like it, but I've got a nitpick, I think, because I do like it as a track, but it just, I start to hear For No One, from the Beatles on Revolver, with a little sort of trumpy thing and a little walk down on the bass, but they didn't make me like it any less, but I could start to see the influences a lot clearer with that distance of whatever it is, 30 years since the album was made.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that. Of there's definitely times where I'm like, oh, you just did a slightly worse version of this other band's type of song. And, you know, it's hard to unhear that when that gets in your head and enjoy the song for what it is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, to that point, I actually put my first note was AI Beatles.
Oh, wow.
Oh, right. I like that.
I know, which is really, but that you wanted complaints. I'm giving them to you.
I listed this as my favorite song on the record. So I did know this one passingly before this week. And in fact, I think I mentioned on a recent episode, the Magnetic Fields episode, that the first Magnetic Fields single was on a mix CD a friend gave me like 20 years ago. That mix CD also had this track on it. And I remember not knowing what it was called or even who the band was. In fact, all these years until this week, I thought he was singing I Am a Century Old. But again, because I never knew the name of the track. But yeah, I like it. I also said mid-period Beatles. I said Sgt. Pepper's. We've said Revolver. And you said mid-period Beatles. I think the breakdown is cool. I think it like highlights the things that I really enjoy about the band. They're great singers, but it's still got that little bit of off-kilterness to it that I appreciate in my pop.
Yeah. This is the one where I was basically saying if they had just put that sing-songy chorus on top of it, it could have been a gigantic smash hit for them and probably would have done that. Again, not to bring everything back to the Beatles, but like that power move where the Beatles were like, yeah, we could do rock better than The Who. So they wrote Helter Skelter to basically show we can write a Who song better than The Who. This would be like writing an Oasis song better than Oasis if they put a sing-songy chorus on it.
Yeah, and I think I could be mistaken, but I believe they attempted something like that on the next record. I don't have all the details in front of me, but keep in mind the Oasis record hadn't come out yet when they are recording or even releasing this.
That's a fair point. Well, Oasis had released some singles leading up. I feel like they released singles for like almost a year leading up to the release of...
Maybe, and they certainly knew who they were they must have seen them live or something. My point is, but if you think about back when they were recording or even writing this stuff, it would have been pretty early compared to when Oasis's first record came out. Yeah, I think it shows off too that they're good at understanding when you're getting tired of a certain rhythm. So while I agree that sometimes his voice can be a little intense or grating on the ear, I think rhythmically, the band always knows when to open it up from that kind of plodding beat in the verse to something much more open in the chorus. It's just a smart move, that's all. Okay, we can keep rolling along to the most played track, at least per streaming data on this record, and the namesake of the album. It's called Parklife.
Do you know? What the fuck is Parklife?
I think it was made up. It's not something that I've heard before. Well, what made me laugh, Rob, as you said, it just reminds me of like people in a village green. But in actual fact, it's sort of the South London, the Southeast London vignettes of kind of working class people. I personally don't like it. It's the one I don't like actually on the album. I can just about bear everything else. I think I love the ballads the most, but this one, there's just something great about it for me. You know, it gives him an enormous sense of satisfaction. It's just, oh God. You know, and the sort of shout back of Parklife, I don't know. It's not for me, that.
I love the absolute fucking balls in this band to have the drunken ramblings of an unemployed guy sitting on a park bench. And then at the end of the chorus go, do you know what I mean? It's like, I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Like, I can understand the words you're saying, but none of them make any sense together. I saw somebody that said that this was essentially Damon bragging about not having to have a job and how he just got to sit on a park bench and watch people. He's like, I don't have to wear a fucking suit. I can do whatever I want. I wake up at 11, so, piss around in the park and watch joggers.
I think I agree with you, Chris. So it is interesting to me that this track has the most plays by far, by a factor of 5 over Girls and Boys.
Line from that in there.
No, I agree. It has a pop sensibility, an oddball pop sensibility that runs through everything they do. There's a quirkiness. There is a charming aspect of it. There's so much sarcasm mixed with bravado on this record. And I think it comes through here. I think I'm just still reeling from just how popular a track like this is. It just doesn't feel like an anthem that people would take up. And I felt the cultural divide the most on a track like this.
Yeah, I guess looking at the lyrics, it's just kind of observations from sitting in a park, I guess, or hanging out in a park.
I will say, gave me a great new insult when he says, who's that gut lord? I'm like, oh, you call somebody a gut lord. I love that.
I also think this feels the most like something the Kinks would do to me.
Yeah.
Is that a compliment?
Again, I don't really have cultural context, but what I remember feeling about a lot of the Kinks material, especially when we dove in on Village Green Preservation Society, is like, I don't get it. It's not for me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It feels quite alienating, I say, because everyone knows this song, because everyone can respond with that, shouting. You'd shout it in each other's faces as you sloshed beer around in a pub. Just whoever was next, Parklife. But I don't know. Everyone really knows it. I just don't know if everyone really loves it, because when they're listening to it, they're probably not actively listening to it. It's probably background sound that they're then chucking their tuppence worth.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and that had always been my way of consuming it, as just sort of like something that happened to come on while I was in the car. But I do think that there's some good production techniques. So he talks about the joggers that go round and then they swirl the words round and round through the headphones. Like, they're not phoning it in. As cheesy as the song is, they put some work into it.
They're absolutely not lazy. I think you cannot say that about them, certainly. Let's keep it rolling here to the next song on our focus list. It's called London Loves. I just want to say, I don't think I've ever said this about a song before, but it reminds me of Fashion by David Bowie.
Oh, really? See, I said this is in excess if Michael Hutchence wasn't depressed all the time, basically.
You planted that seed now. Now I can't help but think of Fashion. I missed that one because I got a bit of T-Rex in one of them, and I can't remember which track it was. And I got a little bit of Bowie with the sax and the horns and a bit of madness.
This song, along with End of a Century, kind of capture what I like most about this band. Again, the harmonies. This one has a weird guitar solo that I don't love.
Bizarre choice.
Yeah, the guitar solo, dude, it's so wild, dude. That's definitely part of what made me think of the Bowie song. Because Fashion is one of Bowie's weirder tunes. But yeah, this guitar solo is wild.
Yeah.
But I think it's got a cool groove. So I listed this as my favorite find on the record. I had definitely never heard this track before this week. I just think there's a lot of cool touches to it. The 3 big pops effect, that gunshot drum sound thing. It's working for me.
I quite like the melodic choice as well. I think it's, just to get a little, what I might say, beardy about it. It is doing that minor third. It goes to the third, second, to the first, and back up again. I was looking at that this morning. Kind of, I think that's quite a nice melodic choice. That I don't know why it feels weird. 'Cause it's not that weird. I thought it'd be weirder than it was, but I just quite like that as a good choice for Damon. And I really like the guitar solo. I was playing it to my son this morning, who's 6, and he was just wild about it. He loved it.
Yeah, it rips. I think this guitar player is great. He makes great, cool, interesting choices.
Yeah, it definitely rips, but I can also see you like pitching this concept. All right, so we got this guitar solo. I'm going to play like no notes in the scale whatsoever. No, nothing even approximate to what the key is. Like, oh yeah, no, go for it. Just, it sounds like you're hitting it with a fucking blender or something like that.
All right. We can keep things rolling. Last song we're going to talk about is called Jubilee. Let's play a clip of that.
Jubilee slouches in the city. He's losing all will to move. He got TV, too much telly. He watching 24 hours of rubbish. He got butane. Plastic bags, his eyes are going square. Oh yeah, he no
Is this your low point, Rob?
I listed this as my low point, not because it's so terrible necessarily. Honestly, it's just okay.
Is it because it's Cheap Trick's Surrender? Is that why you listed it as your low point?
Exactly. Yes, you
Fucking
nailed
hell.
it, buddy.
Yeah.
We're the same. Yes, the opening lines of this melody are so close to Cheap Trick's Surrender.
And the chords
We
are the
have to-
same too.
yeah.
They just moved them down a whole step.
They swing it up at the
well,
end.
it's like it's these same chords. They just moved them down a whole step and then changed the last chord. I was like, come on, man.
Yeah, once I got that in my head, it felt like a throwaway to me. Listen, I left the short interlude tracks kind of off the hook. The very obviously experimental or anachronistic carnival music pieces, because I did find them kind of refreshing. You know, they made me believe the band was really confident in themselves. I'm sort of excluding those from the conversation about a low point. This, as a straight ahead rock song, to me, just feels like they missed their mark.
This is the one that I was least familiar with, even though I sort of know all the tracks. I had to listen to it again and again. Yeah, I think I kind of agree. There's something of like Bowie about it in there somewhere.
It's like a lot of songs on this album. You're just like, yeah, okay,
yeah.
cool. I get,
That's
cool.
definitely a song. All right.
yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with that. Do you know what I mean? I do think it was a very thick album to get through because there's a lot of information to parse, right? When you're trying to intensely listen to a 16-track album that takes so many twists and turns, it's just a lot to take in. I felt like I had to take pauses and take a mental break sometimes. So I do think this song has many of those same hallmarks. I don't necessarily think it's lazy, maybe save for the stealing of the great American band Cheap Trick's melody. But yeah, you're right. It's just not doing it for me.
Yeah.
They have better tunes.
Definitely.
But what does it mean for its overall essentialness in this world before we move on to the next? Must you listen to Blur's Parklife before you die? I'm going to throw it first to Tom.
Oh, putting me on the spot. So I think the answer is yes. I, however, am probably not going to be listening to this album for another 10 years. I think it's got a place, and I think it is experimental, and it's so revered that I don't think that any person from across the pond would respect you if you said, I've never listened to any Blur. Parklife, what are you talking about? So you got to listen to it. You might not enjoy it. It's bloated, it's long, and there are some songs on here that I think are, I'm not going to say cheap copies of other people's stuff, but there's some songs in here that I just don't feel like live up to what the inspiration material was. And because the inspiration material is obvious, it's sort of glaring when they don't live up to that. So I'm still going to give it a yes. I know I just talked shit on it for like 2 minutes, but it's a yes for me.
That is the saddest yes I've ever heard in my
Do it
lifetime.
so some guy doesn't yell at you in a Cockney accent sometime later in life.
That's embarrassing.
Let's mix things up, and let's go to Chris next.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I've been slagging it off, and that's for sort of shits and giggles, and also because it's quite nice to deconstruct things. But for me, it's a simple yes. I think you have to listen to it. For me, it's like a little time capsule, not necessarily because of what it says, but because it was really important part of British culture, and it is in its own parodic way a commentary on that, which is why I think you should listen to it, ideally before you die.
Awesome. That's 2 yes votes. We're going to kick it to you next, Marty.
So, as I alluded to in the beginning here, in the general impressions part of the show, to me, there's nothing memorable about this album. It's almost like background music, and the more you listen to it, the more in the background it falls. So I'm gonna say a definite no on this one for me. It just doesn't grab me anywhere. I wouldn't feel like a good human recommending any of my friends to listen to this album.
Why would we confuse you for a
Wow.
good human, Marty? Come on.
Why am I starting to
don't
feel
have to-
slightly offended that you thought it was...
Finally.
How fucking dare you?
It took this long.
Okay, well, I'm going to weigh in here and just say it's an easy yes for me. I feel like, of course, its impact. It sold so many records. It's the start of something, or at least I think something really important, not just Blur's career, but this whole Brit-Pop genre. But more importantly than that, I did find it very enjoyable. I liked it more the more I heard it. I do plan to listen to it again. I did listen to Blur's other records. I think it's better than Modern Life is Rubbish. And I guess the last thing I'll say was it feels like a moment where art and depth of production is winning. It's matching up with public taste. And that itself is exciting because it doesn't happen that often. So I'm certainly glad I listened to it. I think you should listen to it before you die. Well, that's it, Blur babies. You're on the list. Congratulations. You've been lauded to the heavens by us foolish cheeseburger-eating Americans. You can rest easy now.
Can I change my vote?
You want a double no now?
I just started thinking about the emails, and now I just kind of don't want to deal with it.
Don't fear the backlash, Marty. Lean into
I
it.
don't think they're going to come at you, Marty. I think they're going to come at me for letting the side down.
Okay,
Yes,
fair
and I do
enough.
like it. I'm just being a shit stirrer.
Okay, now that we have finished up with Blur's story and the story of Parklife and we've voted, we do have a couple things left to do here, but I wanted to give a very, very special thank you to Chris for coming on the show, being the first English guest, defending, sort of, Blur, telling us about our mispronunciations. Thank you, Chris.
Pleasure. It's. I'm telling you, it's a real honor for me, and I've done lots of exciting things in my life, and this is right up there. You guys are great. Keep it going. Anytime you want an English voice to completely fuck it up for you and not say what you want them to say, I'm your man.
Awesome. We'll be excited to have you back. But I think in the meantime, since we're about to get into the old mailbag, you did tell me that you had a litany of complaints that you wanted to tell us about from episodes past.
Do I have a litany of complaints? No, I don't. But I have written a letter, if I may read it.
Okay. Terrific. A real live letter.
A real life letter. Dear gentlemen, may I be allowed to get something off my chest? But you must promise not to put rousing classical music over this, like Rule Britannia or the national anthem, because that would be terribly naff.
We're unfamiliar with those tracks, Chris.
Now, I think I talk on behalf of everyone. Suddenly, I am the voice of the UK. We do love you guys deeply, like brothers, even though you all sound the same to us, apart from that one dude. But seriously, fuck me. How many fucking times are you going to say Glasgow? It's Glasgow. Glasgow. Or at a push, Glasgow. And if you're from there, it's Glasgow. But I'd avoid that because it's probably cultural appropriation. And I'm guessing you're going to say this town wrong too. So I want you to read this for me.
Oh, Birmingham.
Birmingham.
You felt, oh, who said that? Tom.
No, that was Rob. I would have said Birmingham. I'd have given a lot of am on that.
I watched Peaky Blinders, Chris. I know something.
There you go. Marty fell into the trap, but Rob pulled himself out of it. So no, it's not Birmingham. Black Sabbath and Napalm Death are not from Birmingham. They're from Birmingham. On top of that, and arguably the thing most likely to get British musos in the tiz is the reckless abandon with which you all piss over us from across the pan. You're pissing on our heroes. Lloyd Cole, the Stone Roses, Oasis, Jamiroquai, Blur, The Smiths, David Hasselhoff. That last one is a personal favourite. Night Rocker is my rubber soul, one for the Patreon listeners. But Napalm Death, Franz Ferdinand, Def Leppard, our country's position in the world was built on the back of these guys. And yes, they're arseholes, but they're our arseholes. And they're not clean, and they're not that nice, and some of them aren't that good to look at. But these arseholes produce some exquisite sound, and we don't want American dicks up in our faces, pounding into our arseholes by jumping on this little chat between high school buddies as you recklessly spray words around thinking they have no effect. We love you, but enough. I respect your countrymen enough to finish this missive with some words from one of your greatest poets, Frederick Allen Mayne III, latterly known as Mr. F. Durst. From his poem, Take a Look Around. Do we always got to cry? Do we always got to live inside a lie? Live inside a lie? Life is just a blast. It's moving really fast. Better stay on top or life will kick you in the arse. Follow me into a solo. Remember that, kid. So what do you want to do? And where are you going to run when you're staring down the cable of a mic, pointed at your grill like a gun? Lots of love from everyone in the UK.
Nice.
Chris, I'm going to go so much harder on the UK from now on. It's a guarantee. I'm not holding back anymore.
That's good. The more you do, the more mailbag you'll get, I'm sure.
There we go.
Indeed. Well, we're excited to hear your response, UK listeners and everybody, to this episode. So please send everything over to 1001 albumcomplaints at gmail.com. But right now, I got some mail from episodes past, so I'm going to dip my hand in. First up, we have listener Buchanan. That might be an assumed name. I'm not really sure if I was supposed to take that seriously or not. Listener Buchanan is annoyed at us for missing something on our Blue Cheer episode. Recall Blue Cheer was an early psych band that we covered recently. Blue Cheer most likely got the idea to do a heavy version of Summertime Blues after seeing The Who perform it at Monterey Pop in 1967. Surprised you didn't make the connection.
I do make it a point of reading the set lists of every band for 3 or 4 years before an album comes out, just to make sure.
You fucking believe how ridiculous that is? Yes, he's right. Sorry, I'll tone it down. He's right. The Who did play Summertime Blues as a cover at the Monterey Pop Festival, and the Blue Cheer backstory did include them going to Monterey Pop, which happened pretty close to their hometown of San Francisco. So it's some good sleuth in there.
Yeah.
And not something I saw mentioned in my research. In my defense, I did not go check. I did check the date on the Who's release of Summertime Blues, which happened much later on a live record. I didn't think to check every single one of their fucking set lists.
Yeah, nice work, nerd.
Seriously.
Just kidding. We love stuff like that. That is a really interesting detail. And I'm actually surprised, to be honest, after reading about Blue Cheer and them going to Monterey Pop, I'm kind of surprised that didn't come up. That said, I listened to the Who's version on Live at Leeds, I want to say it is, and it's significantly less inspired than the Blue Cheer's reinvention. So go figure. All right, we got one more here. It's listener Paul from Belfast. He writes, in defense of an old favorite of the show. Hello, complainers. Over the summer, I took a job on a construction site to earn a bit of cash, and in my first week, I had a run-in with the other workers. They didn't think I was very good at the job, and they were right. And were pretty asshole-ish about it. Eventually, I ended up working on one side of the house while they listened to their radio station over on the other. Lots of terrible music. I decided to counter this by playing my phone speaker, something loud, offensive to the ears. Basically, the ultimate, I'm going to my room to play this music to piss off my parents' energy. I blasted out The Prodigy's greatest hits. And it worked. They stayed the hell away from me.
So his defense of The Prodigy is that it is repellent to people.
He goes on to say, that incident reminded me why in the 90s the Prodigy were the ultimate outlaw band. Sure, there was Blur versus Oasis, how appropriate, and Radiohead were the artsy kids band, but the Prodigy was something different. They were the bad kids band, the ones who smoked behind the gym and left school and got kicked out by age 15. I wasn't one of them, but I admired the outlaw spirit. And I'll also add, complainers, that regardless of how well you like them, they're unforgettable. Case in point, I think they're one of the most referenced bands on your podcast, even if the comments are snarky ones. So you probably still recall them a lot more than many of the other albums and bands you have covered.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. But, you know, their music is not very good. Chris, what's your opinion on The Prodigy? You a fan?
Yeah.
Oh, God damn it, man.
Yeah, no, I really like them.
I mean, he is English, Tom.
All right. Well, there we go. Just don't understand y'all.
You know, the other Prodigy album is also on the list, so we will have to revisit the Prodigy at some point and reconsider our opinions.
I know, yeah.
In any case, we love hearing from you. Keep sending mail over, whatever it may be, whatever's in your hearts, 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. And now we have but one thing left to do this evening, which is to get our homework for next week. I'm going to kick it over to Tom with the Albinator.
Thank you, Rob. I have the Albinator. It has been, I don't know, swilling ale and sitting there looking at people running around outside and making weird comments, because that song feels a little stalkery to me. Parklife does. But I'm going to see if I can get it to rejoin society here and spit us out an album for next week. So without any further ado, drum roll please, we will be listening to another Brit-Pop sensation, Merle Haggard's I'm a Lonesome Fugitive.
Nice. Wow.
I imagine there's going to be lots of experimental work on this one too.
Very art house.
From the depths of the British experience over to deep Americana here.
It's that Bakersfield sound
that we also can't relate to.
Fantastic.
Very, very exciting stuff. I have not heard that. Of course, I know Merle Haggard from a few of his songs, particularly the ones covered by the Grateful Dead. So excited to dive in to I'm a Lonesome Fugitive with you all. We hope you all listen to it and come back and join us next week. Thanks again to special guest Chris. He's been great. We're going to have him back soon, and we are going to sign off for this week. For everyone at 1001 Album Complaints, I have been Rob.
I've been Tom.
I am Marty.
Then I'm sorry.
Boosh.